I'm Ruth Margolin, and I'm the chair of the Diaspora Communities Committee of Jewish Federation of Greater MetroWest, New Jersey's Global Connections Department, which means that our committee is in charge of service to the Jewish communities around the world, but outside of Israel. We take it as our responsibility also to keep all of you informed about the good work being done around the globe on your behalf. So with that in mind, we wanted to host an event introducing you to some of the fascinating and meaningful projects that might be out of the spotlight in interesting places around the Jewish world. Our plan had been to talk about other topics and places entirely, but they will have to wait for another time. This month, it just had to be Ukraine. We chose Ukraine, obviously, because of the urgency of the war. But in order to discuss the circumstances of wartime and the work that we do in wartime, we need context. The Jewish community worldwide and here in New Jersey is not suddenly getting involved in Ukraine because of the war. We've been able to help during this crisis because we were already there during times of calm. We're able to help today because we were there yesterday. So I'm not going to ignore the war, and I promise that our program will address the war and the community's response to its staggering human costs. But I'm going to begin by talking about before, about the context. Now, as we go through the presentations this evening, I invite you to put any questions that you have in the chat as we go. We'll leave time at the end to answer as many questions as we can. So here's some history in a nutshell. Ukraine was a major center of Jewish life from the 1500s to the 1940s. It had important centers of Jewish rabbinic learning, such as in Lvov, where well-known Talmudic commentaries were written. And it was home in the 1700s to the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism, and his great-grandson, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. And centuries later, it was a great center of modern Jewish culture with academies full of a stunning collection of Jewish intellectuals, writers, musicians, artists, Vladimir Horowitz, Louise Nevelson, Sholem Aleichem, Chaim Nachman Bialik, Achad Ha'am. And there were political leaders, Zionists, Zev Jabotinsky, Natan Sharansky, Golden Meir, Levi Eshkol, Meir Dizengoff. Before World War II, about a third of Ukraine's urban population was Jewish. So Jewish culture infused Ukrainian cosmopolitan life. Okay, it wasn't all peaches and cream. There were the Khmelnytsky massacres in the 1600s, destroying 300 Jewish communities. There were pogroms in 1919 that killed about 40,000 Jews. And of course, World War II decimated the community. Of the 800,000 Jews who remained after World War II, many of them moved to Israel or elsewhere once they were able to do so. So the community shrank from its millions down to 100 to 200,000 Jews. It depends on how you count. The seniors who are still in Ukraine have survived the Holocaust, and they've lived through a communist era that attempted to squelch Jewish life. Middle-aged Jews in Ukraine likely suffered some anti-Semitism in education or employment, and they were raised in communist times without access to any Jewish education or culture. The young people, in contrast, are just discovering that they're Jewish. And as you will soon hear, many of them are enthusiastically claiming their heritage, bringing their parents and grandparents along. They're coming of age in an era of good relations between Ukraine and its Jewish community. An openly Jewish president has been elected, something that would be highly unlikely in Poland or Hungary, for example. The complex at Babyn Yar is finally having a suitable memorial built. People can wear kippot on the street without fear of anti-Semitism, which has now been made illegal. And whatever might be said about the current war, Jews are not being targeted as Jews, and Ukrainians are more united than ever. Young Jews in Ukraine are also witnessing the rebirth of Jewish community infrastructure. Synagogues have been established, and with support from all of us, the Joint Distribution Committee, the Jewish Agency for Israel, and other international agencies have created Jewish schools, Jewish youth movements, volunteer networks, senior centers, social service agencies. So let me end by showing you one picture. We have a map coming up. This will be a map of the area surrounding Odessa in 2018. It was on the wall of a Chesed building, one of a network of Jewish communities' central hubs for culture and social services in Ukraine. Let's zoom in a little bit on this map. Each line leads to a number, 6, 3, or even 1. And each number represents a single Jew, wherever he or she is, who is in need of food, medicine, home health aid, firewood. Each person is noticed and cared for, no matter what the distance is. This map is what motivates me. It makes me unceasingly proud of our work. I am incredibly moved to know that when I support our Jewish Federation here in New Jersey, some of my money finds its way to an isolated Jewish cousin I've never met, somewhere in Ukraine, who needs heat for a cold winter or medication for some ailment. What an amazing network that connects me to that person. What phenomenal proof that we Jews truly take care of each other. We can take the picture off. So because we've been helping each of these isolated, needy Jewish seniors for years, we knew exactly where they were and what they needed at this moment of crisis, either continued home care or help with evacuation. But I'm getting ahead of our story. What I've described is the situation in which we would have found the Ukrainian Jewish community in January. Smaller than it once was, but flourishing, proud, energetic. As promised, we're going to talk more about February and March. But with this context now, we first want to show you more of how we in New Jersey have connected with our Ukrainian Jewish family. To do that, I'm pleased to introduce Lori Klinghoffer. Lori is a past president of our Jewish Federation of Greater MetroWest, and she's on the board of the Jewish Agency for Israel, where she chairs the Partnerships Subcommittee and serves as vice chair of the United Israel Appeal. More than that, she has a special place in her heart for a particular small city in the middle of Ukraine.
And that small city is called Cherkasy. We think it's small, but it is home to so many of our family members, and we hold them deep in our hearts, more so now perhaps than ever before. I'll tell you a little bit about that, how that relationship began. It was 1996, and a few of us who were involved in campaign, it was a campaign leadership mission to Kiev, or Kyiv, as we have learned to say now. And during that mission, we were escorted by Chuck Hoffman of blessed memory, who was with the JDC. And during that time frame, it was, a few years post Glasnost, and things had opened up, and communities around North America through the Federation system were matching up with communities in former Soviet Union, mostly in big cities, St. Petersburg, Moscow, Odessa, to name a few. Chuck Hoffman got a real sense of who we were, our Metro West type of spirit. And he suggested the community of Cherkasy, Ukraine, to be our partner. Now, this was a brilliant suggestion because just like us, Cherkasy is one city and the region. We here are the only large federation that is not city-based. We're a bunch of suburbs spread out throughout northern New Jersey, 5 counties. So it was, from the beginning, a love affair. We had a first exploratory mission in '97 with top campaign leader, top federation leadership, also campaign. Jerry Waldorf, blessed memory, I believe was president of the federation at the time, or was immediate past president. He was part of that. And they did an exploratory mission to Cherkasy. And they said, yes, this is a good match. So that's where it began. From then, 2 years later, we had our first official delegation go to Ukraine. Paula was on that mission, who's on the screen tonight. And it was a medical mission primarily. You're going to see some pictures in no particular order here of some of the things that I'll be talking about. On that mission, Paula found new children for her to adopt. Not literally, but figuratively, and she has stayed with them all of these years. Her connection with Max and Yana that began in 1999 has continued through the years. They had a bar mitzvah and a bat mitzvah during one of our visits, and both of them are now in Israel with families of their own. There are others, Yana and Anna, her younger sister, who we met in Cherkazy as young kids. Their mom turned out to become ill several years later and passed away. But the girls, they maintained the relationship. Eventually, they both also emigrated to Israel. Their dad is still in Cherkazy. So it began with Yana and Anna and Paula. That's where the family began. This is Paula and me with the head of the Hesed Center, who still sits in Cherkazy today. Shows you he's our brother. We feel that close to him. We continued almost annual visits after 1999, and our family roots began further and further planted. We were witness to many life cycle events, B'nai Mitzvah, and on one mission, we had the full cycle. We saw the first Brit Milah in Cherkazy that had happened in 70 years. We were present at a wedding, and I had one of the honors to do a Sheva Brachat during that ceremony, and I practiced fiercely for like an hour beforehand, so I wouldn't mess up. And then, of course, the traditional B'nai Mitzvah of all the kids. There's one story that Paula tells, and since I've got the mic tonight, I'll tell it in her stead. There's a young boy, not so young, teenager, Micha. And Misha was already past bar mitzvah age. Paula had, of course, developed a relationship with him and said, "Why aren't you going to be bar mitzvah?" He said, "I'm too old. I can't do this." And Paula told him, "Yes, you can. And if you do, I'll be back to be for you for that event." A year later, we returned to Cherkazy, and sure enough, Misha was on the bima becoming a bar mitzvah. So you're getting a sense, I hope, of how deeply connected we are to our family in Cherkazy. I was not on that 1999 mission. So when I was women's campaign chair in 2000, I took it upon myself to help to request that we organize a women's mission to Cherkazy, which we did. It was incredibly powerful. We had an added male element on that mission. We brought 5 Israeli women from Ofakim and Merchavim, our partnership community there, to make the circle complete, all of our partners together, women together for a Shabbaton. It was a remarkable experience, one that none of us will ever forget. After we did this mission, our peoplehood group began connecting with the Israelis and with Cherkazy at the same time. And we have a family camp where counselors from New Jersey and from Israel join the families in Cherkazy. You're going to hear from Danielle Rockman Green shortly, who is one of our best examples of committed Cherkazy connections. Of course, the center of Jewish life in Cherkazy has been the Hesed Center. Ruth explained to you what that is, what they are. Ours is no different. It really is, up until now, a warm home for so many. Simeon, who was the director at the time, is Misha's father, who Paula encouraged to become a bar mitzvah. You're getting the interconnections here. Now, Dimitri, who you saw Paula and me with earlier, and I'm sitting here with him on this particular slide. Under their leadership, we've seen the growth of the Hesed Center and such community pride. There's been a renovation. We were able to plant a new tree when we were there visiting one time. Programs have been added, activities for seniors. Paula's family donated space for a beautiful, beautiful day center for the seniors. Kids, moms, and babies. My connection continues through constant contact throughout this month with Dimitri and others in the community. Tamila is there. Tamila is one of the teachers of the kindergarten, of the students in the religious school. Yana and Anna's father, Michael. Tamila, as you see here, and Galina, who's the music teacher. I cannot begin to tell you the level of appreciation coming from them just because I get in touch with them every day or every other day. How are you doing? We're thinking of you. Nothing more, nothing less. I'm going to tell you one brief story before we get to this slide. Another young woman reached out to me about a week, 10 days before the war began on Facebook to friend me. At first, I didn't recognize her, but I knew the face was familiar. And she was from Cherkasy. So with all that was going on, the buildup around the borders, of course, I accepted her friendship. The Tuesday after the war broke out, I'm walking in my kitchen past my Facebook portal, and there's an incoming call from Olga. She's in a panic. It's only the 4th or 5th day of the invasion, and she is beside herself, doesn't know what to do. I was able to, I must say, I have never, in my experience, been confronted that personally, that face to face with somebody in that desperate a state of mind. This is what we are doing. We are responding to this desperation. I was able to connect her through the hotline for the Jewish Agency to some people there. And she and her parents, who she said were elderly, when I asked her how old, I said, not so old, I'm just a year younger. They're safely in Romania now. But her husband and her older son are still in Cherkasy. So yes, we're there. We care deeply. This is family, and the war has become very personal for all of us. It's not just over there. It's in our hearts. It's with people we care about. Today, David Lachivsky, who you see in this slide in the purple shirt, is the president of the Jewish community there. They're David Saginaw. He's in Israel now with, I think, maybe 160, I think I heard, others from Cherkasy who joined him on the journey. When they arrived, they were met by our MetroWest family there. They celebrated Purim together. We brought together all our alumni, Shinshinim, Rishonim, Shlichim, and we had a few of our community members happen to be in Israel, Ellen Goldner, Barbara Drench, Howard Tepper, to try to celebrate Purim, to make some sense of, okay, you are safe here, you're now in Israel. From all reports, it was a remarkable, remarkable opportunity for them. So today we continue to pray for their safety, for an end to this craziness, and for the revival of the Cherkasy that we love so dearly. And on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Danielle Rockman Green to tell her story about her relationships in Cherkasy.
Danielle's coming on. She got bumped off Zoom, so just give her 1 second.
She's back.
Jill, make her a co-host, please.
Thank you. Well, Lori, thank you for the introduction. I have no idea what you said, but I'm sure it was wonderful. Thank you everyone for coming tonight. I think Lori said that I'm going to be talking about our flagship program, which is our family camp in Cherkasy, which I have been attending. You know, my first summer was in 2013. So I'm going to share a little bit about that, about what camp is and about my own experiences there. The Cherkasy Family Summer Camp is a 10-day multi-generational program that immerses Ukrainian Jews and their Jewish heritage. Like I said, it's our flagship program, and our camp employs 6 madrichim, or counselors, 3 usually from our Greater MetroWest community here in New Jersey, 3 from Israel, and then the rest of the madrichim, the rest of the staff, are already on the ground in Ukraine. The participants range in age. Like I said, it's multi-generational. So one summer we had a baby celebrating his first birthday, and then another summer we celebrated a community member's 90th birthday. Many of our camp's participants are exploring their Judaism for the first time, while others like Anya and Yana, whom Lori told us about, they have been a part of the Cherkasy Jewish community from day one. It is impossible to know exactly what you're getting into when you go to camp for the first time. And it's also impossible that once you've been, to return home as the person you were before going. Our camp program is a program like no other, and it's a place where friends become family in a matter of minutes. Every second of camp is filled with meaning, and I want to share a particularly meaningful story from my first summer spent in Cherkasy in 2013 when I was just 19 years old, which is, I can't even believe it's been that long already. As Lori shared earlier, every summer we have an incredibly special B'nai Mitzvah ceremony and celebration. When I went to Cherkasy for the first time in 2013, I expected the ceremony to be similar to those in the US. And Tamar's going to show a couple of pictures from a B'nai Mitzvah celebration and ceremony. What I experienced was something even more touching than I had anticipated, right? I was 19. I had just finished my freshman year of college. I went to day school. I was at a bar bat mitzvah every weekend of 7th grade. And I just assumed that the celebration and ceremony would be identical. And of course, it was not that. The participants recited the appropriate blessings. They read a few verses from the Torah. And at the conclusion of the ceremony, they each made a short speech about what it meant for them to become a bar or bat mitzvah. And the day was, every year, the day is filled with pride and joy and just an abundance of happy tears. Just remember that I was 19 at the time. And at the end of every ceremony, each camper is blessed by their parents or whoever is accompanying them at camp. And one of the B'not Mitzvah, one of the girls, had no guardian. And that morning she came up to me and asked me in Russian, and she said, "Will you bless me?" I'm like, "Will I bless her? What do you, like, I'm 19. I don't know how to bless a child. I know that I'm given this blessing every Friday night by my parents. I know it by heart for that reason. But in my head, I'm thinking, like, can I even do this? Am I legally allowed to do this according to Jewish law?" And all the while I'm thinking this, I'm telling her, "Oh my gosh, of course I'll bless you." And internally I'm freaking out. And the moment when I blessed this girl was momentous for both of us. We cried and we cried and we cried. And when I took my hands off her head, she looked at me and she said, "Spasiba, mama," thank you, mom, in Russian. Clearly, it made quite an impression on me as I've continued to return to Cherkasy for several summers. For more than 20 years, our federation has helped to keep Judaism alive and vibrant in Cherkasy. And I want you all to just think about the significance of that. And in the process of doing so, those of us who have participated in this amazing program have received as much, if not more, than we've given. Dove, our CEO, once wrote several years ago that the Hebrew word for give is natan. It's a palindrome. It's spelled nun, taf, nun in Hebrew. Spelled forward or backwards, the word is the same. Giving works both ways. Giving is also receiving. And now it is my honor to introduce and turn our program over to David Saginaw, president of our federation, who will share some of his impressions from his last visit to the Polish-Ukrainian border.
Thank you, Danielle. You know, it's I'm watching the screen as you're telling your story, and more than a few of us needed some tissue. So thank you so much for sharing that. Now I have to sort of regroup myself, so give me a second here. So a week ago, I actually did return from Poland and the Ukraine border, where I was on a mission of about 25 people representing 10 of the larger Jewish federations across the country and North America, actually. And the reason that Jewish Federations of North America wanted to run these missions, there's another one actually that's returning this evening as we speak, is not to necessarily witness what is going on, because we're seeing things today 24/7. We see images on every channel that you can go through on cable. And so we see what's happening, and it's devastating. And so our reason really wasn't to go there to bear witness to what's happening. I believe that what they really wanted us to do, at least from my perspective, was to get a sense, a real sense, of what our partners on the ground in Poland, in Moldova, in Romania, in Ukraine, in Russia, from the JDC and the Jewish Agency for Israel and World Order are doing every single day during this war in order to bring people out, get them to safety, and help them start on the new path in the next chapter of their lives that have been turned upside down by this horrible war. And so that's what we did. We met with people. We met with the rabbi, the national rabbi of Poland. We spoke to a lot of people, but when we visited the border, what we saw there, you've seen on your TV screens. And I'm hoping that Elisheva Masso, who I will introduce in a couple of minutes, will shed a little bit more light on this. What we have to understand is what we're seeing on television, what we saw at the border, was after people have crossed the border from Ukraine into Poland. What we didn't see are the actual stories of what they encountered having to get there, whether it was traveling 2 or 3 days, waiting a day in line, in order to get out, to have their papers processed. The thing that impressed us the most, and which is what I thought they wanted us to come back with, was the work that's being done on the ground every day before the war by the line staff in Ukraine, in Russia, in Poland, in all of these countries. They were able, because they do that 24/7 every day beforehand, they were able to react immediately and be planful in order to make things happen, particularly for the Jews, but also for non-Jews. So as an example, before refugees physically leave, there were flyers sent out. There were posters posts on social media with hotlines that they could call, because everybody has cell phones, that they could call saying, I'm coming to the border, can somebody meet me? And that's what would happen. They'd get to the border, they'd call the hotline. There would be representatives from the Jewish agency, from JDC, waiting on the other side of the border for them to not whisk them away, because they still had to get in line to get on buses, but then they could be given the individual attention that they required in order to make the process as seamless as possible. And again, it's horrifying that they had to leave their husbands, leave their brothers in Ukraine to fight, and they just had to get up and leave. And so I want to impress on everybody here, the things that we don't see is what these workers do, these professionals do every single day, and the difference they are making in the lives of Jews in particular, but everybody that is trying to escape this horrific situation. And just as an example, I was told, we got there a week ago, that 2 weeks before, at that very crossing, where now today, it's almost like a convention. There are, I would say, scores, probably 50 booths of all different kinds of services, so that when the refugees walk through the gate into Poland, they get food, they get water, they get clothing, anything that you can imagine, so they feel safe and welcomed. 3 weeks ago, there was nobody there, okay? Because the volunteer system in Poland hadn't geared up for this. They'd never done this before. Although JDC and Jaffe were right there at the border, now it's, as I say, it's like a convention in a very good way, in that the volunteerism in Poland and in Moldova and Romania is at a height that they've never seen before, because people want to help. And so they flock to the border to do anything that they can to help. But I just want to emphasize, other than all those other organizations that are providing services, the Herculean effort of the JDC and the Jewish Agency for Israel staff on the ground in Poland, and by the way, still in Ukraine, servicing those who cannot leave, is just something to marvel. And I think that was why they wanted us to be there. The sense of pride that we have, that when we raise money in our UJA campaign, and where it goes, when we say it goes to our historic partners overseas, JDC and the Jewish Agency for Israel, these are the things that make it possible for miracles to happen. And that's what's really happening at the borders. So with that, I want to turn it over to Elisheva Massel, who is the Director of Strategic Partnerships at JDC, to give us a little more insight in terms of what is happening there. So Elisheva, it's yours.
To introduce the chairperson of Global Connections at the Jewish Federation, Rebecca Gold.
I still haven't learned how to unmute myself after all these years. It's terrible. Elisheva, I'm near tears, actually. I can't thank you enough for the work that JDC does on our behalf. I'm so glad that I went to Cherkasy with Ruth and several other people here in 2018. So I have a real tie, a real connection to this population and to our Jewish people and our friends there. It makes this all the more meaningful and makes me all the more committed to helping to continue to support the work that our partners do on the ground there. And we can't thank you enough. Ruth Margolin, you're a passionate and articulate volunteer extraordinaire and a stellar chair of Diaspora Communities. Thank you. Thank you to David Saginaw, our president, Lori Klinghofer, Danielle Green, you're a superstar. You touch me every time you speak about family camp and all of your connections in Cherkasy. We love you. And thank you, of course, to Tamar Reshef, our community shlicha, our Israeli emissary, for putting this together, and to all of the professionals who make our vision a reality. You make all of us volunteers look so good, and we know how much it goes into this, how hard it is to get these things coordinated, and we appreciate each and every one of you. At the beginning of Russia's assault on Ukraine, our Federation Board of Trustees immediately allocated $500,000, like immediately, in a second. And it was only 24 hours before that money was working for us on the ground. And then that wasn't it. Our Greater MetroWest Federation and Jewish Community Foundation has already raised and granted over $2 million in emergency relief to help the Ukrainian Jewish people and all of the people there who are struggling. In coordination with our JDC and Jaffe partners in Ukraine, throughout Eastern Europe, and in Israel, we are able to get financial support and aid exactly where it needs to be as quickly as possible, and to help those who are suffering unimaginable hardships. As I think of the needs of the thousands of Jewish Ukrainians who have been hurt, displaced, and traumatized, for those who are finding safe haven in Israel, in neighboring countries, and for those who choose to stay in Ukraine, I am inspired by your generosity and our Federation's ability to respond. If you haven't already, please help us meet these needs by contributing to this year's UJA annual campaign and to the Ukraine Emergency Fund. The link will appear on the screen. Feel proud that we live in a time and a place that gives us the freedom and the means to respond so quickly and generously. Thank you, truly. I really appreciate each and every one of you. Sorry about that. Is there something going up? Did it go up? Yep. Thank you, everyone. Shalom.
Vitraot.